Okay, welcome all. And so now we are recording and we're starting our class for April for Apostilles for Notaries. And so what I'll start by doing is, well, introducing myself. My name is Aniansi English, but you guys can call me Annie. And I'll be the instructor for this evening. But in the meantime, we have some announcements. So I'll pass it over to Tammy Miller, who's going to be helping to facilitate and moderate for us. So take it away, Tammy.
Thank you. Good evening, guys. I'm Tammy, as she stated, or duly noted, here in the Metro Atlanta area. I am facilitating this session for Notary Nerds, the Apostille for Notaries. Monica asked me to step in. Her business is kind of growing, so she's needing a little help here. My primary purpose, especially for this class tends to be pretty large. My primary purpose is to just kind of make sure it goes as smooth as possible as far as all the questions, because it is information heavy. So I'm going to ask that you raise your hand and or put your question in the chat box, and I will be consistently monitoring, trying to make sure everybody's question gets answered while in between Annie actually doing her presentation. That is pretty much it. Hope you learn a lot, and thanks for spending your time this evening with us.
Okay, thank you, Tammy. And so let me get this, oh my goodness. Let me get it going, but without music. Okay. So bear with me here. There's we've got some more students coming in, so welcome all. And then as you come in, if you would go ahead and type your name, your state, and your email. And if you can put your state abbreviation by your name, that would be helpful. And that way we'll try to comment if we know certain things about the states. Okay, and I'm just rearranging my screens. And just gonna share here again.
And for those that don't know, you can rename yourself this session, and only just click on your name in that white type, and what is that, right click and click on rename, and then you can write your name and your state so that we can see when Annie answers your questions, if just in case for answering these state specific.
Okay. Let's see here. Well, let me see. Is it clear enough where you guys can see the whole slide?
Yes, I'm able to see the whole slide.
And and you guys, if you can see the whole slide, just put a yes in the chat. I forgot to let you know that from time to time I'll be asking questions, and definitely put it in the chat. Let me just get my chat window open as well.
Okay, Annie, I am seeing a bunch of yeses that can see the slide.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we'll get going. Thank you for your patience as we sort through all the different technical stuff. But a little bit about me, and then I'd love to do a little poll in a minute and find out a little bit about you guys as well. But yeah, I do have a BA in communications and Spanish, and so as life throws different things at you, I ended up figuring out that my specialty was document preparation. So sometimes I worked, like in medical transcription. Sometimes I've worked with legal paperwork and drafting, well, not drafting, but making sure to edit and proof through different legal drafts. And here lately in the last 14 years, doing a lot of notary work and apostille work. And so I've been a notary public with the state of Tennessee for 14 years. working with apostilles for 10 years. And when I'm not doing notary stuff, I translate or interpret, and I've been doing that for 20 years. So been with the NNA and a notary for 14 years, but got Ron certified here in the last year. And so I'm happy to be here with you guys and sharing some of this apostille knowledge that has been very closely guarded. But there's the course disclaimer. And as I mentioned the last time, whenever you guys do the replay, you can go into it in details. But here is the abbreviated version. And welcome all that are coming in. And so the Apostilles for Notary course is an informational training course. It doesn't provide legal advice at all or for any particular situation, because the course creator, and that's myself, I am not an attorney. All students are encouraged to consult their state's notary laws and also to consult their Secretary of State's office for clarification, because you're going to see that there's state-specific information. There's a general apostille procedure, but then there's state-specific steps. But once we're done, I'm hoping that you guys will feel comfortable, confident. You'll go to your state's Secretary of State page and do a little research about what things are similar and what things are different from the general model that we'll kind of go over. And students who watch or take this Apostilles for Notaries course agree, and I'm counting on you guys so that we can continue to produce good, solid information for you guys, that you agree to the terms and use of conditions with this disclaimer, which is not to copy, photograph, or record or reproduce the course information to disseminate on social media, Facebook groups, or personal pages, but rather that you take notes that will be helpful to you and will be for your personal use. Okay? So with that in mind, yeah, so when we were talking about the different things that notaries and new notaries were asking about, we thought that you guys always are looking for a way to diversify your services, for a way to have something extra in your lineup that you can offer, and that way stay busy as much as possible. I'm a notary too, so I know what that's like, and we know we have to keep it going. So I did prepare a poll. Let me see if I can pull it up, and let's see if you guys, can you guys see it? You can't see it yet, right?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. I'm gonna launch it, and you guys should be able to see it. Feel free to to click on what works for you. How long have you been a notary? Several choices there. And the nice thing about it, it tells me how we're doing. So 50% of you guys have participated. If there's anybody else out there, feel free to select what category you fall in under, and that'll give us an idea for all of us to kind of have. And the class is a little bit big, but in the future, I hope that you guys would love to hear from all of you. But in a minute, we'll just open up the mics for if a few of you just want to comment. So we've got 77% participation. I'll give it another 10 seconds. If anybody wants to comment, now's the time, because the poll will end and we'll just kind of share that. And we're glad to have you all here at Apostilles for Notaries. Don't be shy in terms of making sure to get your questions in the chat as I'm explaining, so that we can try to get an answer to you. We'll have a question and answer session at the end, half an hour. And if what doesn't get answered today, we'll be meeting again tomorrow. So tomorrow, 5 p.m. Central Standard, I'll meet you guys here again. So, okay, poll is ending. We got a 90% participation. And let me go ahead and share some results. A good 59% of you guys are like in your first year, so getting a grip or a hang of all of this. Another 50% have been doing it for 2 to 4 years. And oh, wait a minute, I think can you guys see the results?
Yes.
Okay, so sharing those results with you. And so as you see, we're all, in a different spot in our notary career, but we're all here. So so nice to be able to share with one another. Before I move forward, just wanted to check, does anybody want to unmute and tell us about why they want to know more about apostilles?
What is that?
I will.
Okay, so just tell us your name and your state.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Davison. I'm in Texas. I'm one of the ones who's been a notary for about, I've been a notary since 2019, so just that 2 years. And I have taken a couple of apostille trainings, but one of my mentors, she does apostilles and fingerprinting, and she suggested that I get into it, especially since I'm wanting to eventually quit my 9-to-5 and do notary full time. So I want to make sure I diversify. I do all the other stuff like field inspections and wedding officiant, but
Okay.
apostille and that are my last little pieces.
Okay, so thanks for sharing with us. And that's encouraging, because the nice thing about it is when we put all of these things together, we end up staying busy. We will have something to do on a daily basis. And so that brings us to what will we go over in this course between today and tomorrow. It'll be going into the most important question for this topic, which is, what is an apostille? Why is the process needed? Sometimes we think, who needs this? Are people in my community going to be needing it? How is it obtained? And how much should I charge? Disregard
Annie.
that. Yeah.
Adriel in Florida has a quick question.
Okay. Disregard Thursday at 7. That was the last time. So
I didn't have a question. I apologize. I was just raising my hand to kind of volunteer.
oh yes,
But
yes.
someone already did it, so no worries, no worries.
No, but tell
You can
us
continue.
what you think about apostilles.
So I'm just interested in it to see what other services I can offer, like you said, to constantly stay busy, have something to do on a daily basis, and not kind of get bored of just doing, continuous loan signings. Always stay busy, have different things to do, and just get to know different people from different walks of life. So that's kind of what I've been doing, and I've been doing this since about November of last year. So
Okay.
this is what I'm here for, just to learn some new things.
Great, and good to have you, Adriel. And thanks for sharing that, because yeah, we definitely, and that's another thing that we've noticed, that as we learn this, if I ever had an apostille where I needed notarized in Florida to then send to the Secretary of State, maybe I can reach out to Adriel. So we can kind of have a network, and for sure there's enough for everybody. In this kind of work, there's enough for everybody, because you kind of will dominate the radius around where you live. But if there's an apostille from somebody in your area that needs to get done in Florida, well, then you can reach out. So some of the objectives, and thanks for sharing, y'all, that we want to cover today is know the role of your Secretary of State's office. If you're already a notary, maybe those in the first year, you might be a little fuzzy on the Secretary of State, but that was the state body that commissioned you, and you may have done the oath at the county clerk's office, but then they send everything to the state. So there's a Secretary of State, an official that holds that position, and then that department. And then if you're still not sure, where or who's your Secretary of State, then you can Google Secretary of State for the state of, and then that'll get you there. Another important thing is to understand your role in apostilles. Somebody asked me, does the notary provide the apostille? Is it a stamp? So we'll clarify that. Also, what you need to do to accept an apostille request when customers are saying, can you take care of this? We always pause. We don't say a quick, I do say a quick yes, I'd love to help you, but then I need to look at the document, because there's a few things you want to clarify before you commit to a time frame and a price. Also, you're going to learn about what kind of documents may come to you that need apostilling, and what is this Hague conference. You're going to hear Hague, non-Hague. We'll clarify that. So we'll start with talking about how this all got going, because basically apostilles were not a thing until 1961 with the Hague Convention. There's a Hague conference in the country of Netherlands. There's a city called The Hague, and they've been meeting since the 1800s, late 1800s. But in 1961, there was a particular convention that was signed at the conference. And what used to happen before, whenever, and I'm just trying to make sure that we can everybody hear? Because we had a little background sounds. Okay. But what happened was October the 5th, 1961, they came up with a new process. So let's talk about the old process. The old process was a legalization process. It was a lengthy process. It was costly. It involved attorneys. And so to get a document from one country to another was a hassle. People had to go to several departments. They didn't know where. So in 1961, they decided, hey, all the member nations, if you would like to simplify it to make it a one-step process, maybe 2 steps, but usually 1, you can vote. And so when they took up the vote, there's the Hague countries, the countries that agreed that they want to simplify a document going from one country to another, and to go through kind of a process where it's saying this document is legit in terms of the fact that it did come out of a particular agency or department in one country going to the other. So that when the foreign country receives it, in our case, we're going to be speaking of documents that leave the US going to a foreign country, going overseas, so that when the country abroad receives it, they're comfortable that it was a public document that was legit in the US. So that's all the mystery, that it basically is a process that will add a certificate to documents that are traveling overseas. Before the convention, again, it was the legalization. But then, of course, like we were always saying, it can never be simple. A lot of countries, several countries, not a lot, the majority signed up, but some countries still trailed behind and still do the old process. So those are the non-Hague countries. Now, how to know which is which? Well, the Hague Convention and the Hague Conference, they did come up with a list. And so it's found in this table in the official website. And on the replay, you can either take a picture of it now, or on the replay, you can get to that. I tried to link it. Let me see if it works. It may or may not. Oh yeah, I know why it doesn't. Okay, so we're not even gonna. I'll share with it at the end, but that is the link. Now, something that I found useful is that the Secretary of State for Alabama, on their page, they did, which is the second one here, they did a chart, and that chart is very helpful. So I'm going to try something here and see if we can get there. So that you guys can benefit. Oh, excuse me. Let's get that down. Okay. If not, I'll have to go to another page. But okay, so this is it. The Alabama Secretary of State has a nice chart, because it's either going to be going to a Hague country and get an apostille, or it's going to be going to a non-Hague country. And that's another step, legalization. I'll touch on it briefly towards the end, because that's a whole nother ball game. But isn't this chart wonderful? I'll just throw it out there for you guys to kind of help. Within the first few countries, if somebody comes to you and says, I need to get this document to Aruba, if you guys don't mind putting it in the chat, Is it gonna need an apostille? Or is it gonna need a legalization, which in this case, they're gonna give it a certification paperwork. I'll give you guys a minute to comment. And finally, I can see my chat as well. And yeah, wonderful. See, it's like, thank goodness it's a no-brainer. What if it were the country of Bolivia? Either Bolivia or Brazil, a student comes to you and says, hey, this is my transcript, but I need to get it apostille before I leave the country. Would you be able to send that up to your Secretary of State to get an apostille? Exactly, but what about if somebody says Canada, which is a neighbor country? You think it'd be easy. So is Canada gonna need an apostille or is it gonna need a certification? Exactly, and I'm glad that somebody said authentication, Lauren. Thank you, Lauren, because this is the thing, and you'll get used to it as you go along. But either a country is a Hague country and is going to get an apostille.
El Paso makes everyone's taco eating experience better.
Thank you. So either it's a Hague country and it's going to get an apostille, or it's a non-Hague country and it's going to go through 4 steps that compose a legalization process. But after the document's notarized, the next step is to send it to your Secretary of State, and they call it different things when it's a non-Hague country. Some Secretary of States call it a certification, some call it an authentication, and every so often there's another term. So don't be, surprised that changes. The important thing is it's a non-Hague, and it's not going to get an apostille. It's going to do the 4-step process, which we'll discuss a little bit further down. But with this in mind, let's go back to our presentation. But I found that to be super helpful, that chart. And of course, you have the official one, which is right here. And you can definitely look and, explore and get to know that one as well. Okay, so meat and potatoes, what in the world is an apostille? Well, it turns out that even though it is a special certification, it's an actual physical document. So an apostille is a special certificate that is affixed to a public document that is going from one country to be presented in that other foreign country. Both countries have to be a party to the Hague Convention. So that part is what we just went over. From our point of view, all documents are going to be leaving from the United States to some other country. And that's why whenever they tell us, one of our first questions to them is, where is it going? Because once we find that out, then we know to check the chart and see if they're going to be needing an apostille or a legalization. With that in mind, the word apostille came from the French, and it kind of meant a marginal note or a notation, and that was associated with the certification of a document, meaning that the document was good to go. And with that in mind, that is why sometimes you'll hear a little controversy about, how do you say it? Is it apostille? Is it apostille? Is it apostille? Well, there's variations because the word, came from the French, but it's whatever you hear that is used in your community predominantly. Like when I called here, Secretary of State, when it all started, they refer to it as an apostille. So mine is not so apostille, but the important thing I always feel is that at least when the customer says what they need, that we can understand. That's the important thing. And that we can assist and get that cash, because there's good cash to be made with it. And the important thing is because it's detail oriented and because you're providing a service that they are in the dark about. So I think it's wonderful because some people are stressed and they don't know where to go, and we can be that person to help. So I'll go over one more slide and then open up for a few questions. An apostille authenticates on these documents that they are bringing to us. If they're coming from the state, we're usually going to see a seal and a signature of the public official who has signed. And some of these documents can be birth certificates, they can be state court orders, other documents issued by a public authority, so that the document can be recognized in a foreign country that are members of the 1961 Hague Convention Treaty. So this is the definition of apostille by our US State Department. And, and then this is a good one, and I think I have a poll for it, even though if you read the slide, you're gonna know the answer. But let me see if I can see my other questions. And the big question is, so a document is brought to us to get an apostille. We send it to our Secretary of State to get that apostille. Does the apostille certify the content of the document, the matter that's being discussed in the document, or does it certify the origin of the document, that it's coming or it passed through a US state agency, state or federal agency? So I'll give you a moment there to go ahead and vote about whether an apostille certifies the content of the document or the origin of the document. And I'll give it another like 15 seconds, so a few more of you can participate. We have 50% of you that have already participated, so thank you. And then this is very interesting because many times we think it certifies the content. It makes the content legal. But if you'll remember, as notaries, when we notarize something, and you guys can put this in the chat, when we notarize something, are we making the content legal or not? And thank you for voting. I'll go ahead and end the poll now. So as notaries, when we notarize, like Nancy mentioned and Linda, we're not making the document legal. We're just certifying that the person that said that they were the ones that were going to be signing it, or that swore that what the material was in there was true, that they did come before us. So the same thing happens, and I'll share the results, and 87% of you were right. The apostille certifies the origin of the document, that it did pass through a US, in this case, a US agency, either the state or the federal authentications office. So it doesn't have anything to do with the content. And that will be very interesting, because further down we'll talk about when all of a sudden somebody brings you a document and it's written in Spanish or French. I've had Arabic, Spanish, and in Hindu. So they bring you a document that's written in another language and you're like, oh no, I'm not going to be able to do anything with this because I can't even read the document. That is not a concern. That is not our concern. So we'll go into that a little bit further down. Did I ever share the results? Did you guys see them?
Yes.
Okay, there we go. So
Annie,
yeah, so we have questions.
Yeah, Veronica, she asked if we could go back. So this would probably be 2 or 3 slides back. She wanted to get a website from a couple of slides ago.
Yes. And was it the one where there's this one where there's the table?
Yes, this one. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, make sure you guys can take a quick picture, or again, in the replay library, you guys can go there and check it out. What I even did, I prepared a digital workbook. The only thing, that one is at the end, I'll give you my website, and that one is for purchase, you know, on my website, but it's a digital notebook that if you watch the replay, you can take notes on it, and you can fill it in. And so, and then of course you can print it afterwards if you so desire. So with that in mind, let me close this. And let's move on to a few more slides. Right, and so this just kind of clarifies what we just went over, that an apostille is a certificate that's issued by the competent authority. That for us, for 96% of the US states, it's the Secretary of State. 2 or 3 states have a different body, but when you ask and when you Google, you can even ask your Secretary of State, they will direct you to the right body, but they're called the competent authority by The Hague. In our case, we know it's the Secretary of State. The apostille only certifies the authenticity or origin of the signature of the official, and the apostille does not certify the content of the document for which it was issued. And I'll just take a moment here and say that if it's a state document, what we're looking for is that the state document has the state seal and has the signature of a state official. And it probably goes over the state official's position, title, or capacity. But that is just so that you can kind of recognize, oh, this is a state document, you know, like a birth certificate, or it might even be a business document, like articles of incorporation, that's like a business document issued by the state. So that's just so that you know that that particular document will not need notarizing. So speaking of that, let me move forward and we'll talk about documents in a minute, and then that'll be the starting point. Just because what we are going to be doing is accepting documents, so we kind of want to know what we'll do with them once we get them. But another question.
I'm sorry, one last little question here. Miss Arena George states, doesn't apostille expire ever?
That's an excellent question, Miss Arena, because the apostille, in a minute, you'll see what that cover sheet looks like, which from my last class, I loved it. One of the students said, oh, it's just a cover sheet. So it's a certificate, but it does go on top of everything. It's going to have a few dates on it, but the Hague Convention mentions that a country should never reject an apostille because it's expired, because it shouldn't be, it's not something that's time sensitive as to expiration. However, some countries, they want to know that you got this document recently, you know, that they want to make sure that it's not an old birth certificate, but it's a recent birth certificate. And recent birth certificates might have, you know, new security watermarks and features. So sometimes it depends on the requesting country that may say, you know, get this to me within such and such time, or make sure it's a recent birth certificate. But in and of itself, the apostille doesn't expire. So hopefully that answered your question. And oh, and if you want to unmute, Miss Arena, did you have a follow-up question to that, or does that kind of answer?
Nope, that answered my question. Thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome. So this slide here reminds us that some people wonder, do you have to be a notary to assist with an apostille? Not necessarily. So if, let's say you're doing your business with your sister and your sister isn't a notary, she doesn't have to be a notary to assist with this part of the business, because basically you'll be getting documents from the person. There's a portion that needs to be notarized. So if the agent that's helping is not a notary, they're going to need to pay a notary to do it. So the benefit from us being notaries is that we can charge for that portion, but we're going to be working as connectors. We're like a middle person, connecting the person to the steps that need to be taken. We're going to be a courier, because in some cases, if we can travel to the Secretary of State and drop off the documents, some of us who live closer to our state's capital can do that. There was a benefit before the pandemic to doing that, where it could be quick. But now during the pandemic, many Secretary of States just say mail it in. So in the end, it's going to end up the same place. They've improved their processes with, you know, taking receiving the apostille requests by mail. So if you want to send it, if you live far away from your state's capital and you want to send it FedEx, that's one way. Turns out the US Postal Service has a priority service. You know that there's special envelopes that they have that will, they guarantee 2 to 3 days. And it looks like you have to check with them, but for an extra fee, you can place insurance on it just in case something happens to the document. So by mail is fine, but if you want to drop it off, you can do that as well. So, and then in the end, when you get the apostille, you can decide with your customer if you're going to hand deliver it to them, and that's, you get a little bit of travel fee that you can charge there, or if they're going to come pick it up. So with that in mind, we'll now go into what clients would need an apostille and what does an apostille look like. And then towards the end of this hour, then I'll talk about the steps to do an apostille. So because an apostille is a document that, a certificate that's placed on a document that is leaving the US to another country, the people involved in that usually need one are international students. Sometimes it's clients that need to apply for a dual citizenship. Many times I find that it's moms that are doing that paperwork. And also those planning a destination wedding, for example. So if you get in touch with, or you start researching different Facebook groups that have to do with travel, or reaching out to travel agencies in your state, those who are planning a destination wedding, which became popular, of course, before the pandemic. But now a lot of the airfares are low and people are taking advantage. So those that can travel, if they're traveling to a faraway place like Bali or Thailand, or they want to do their destination wedding in the Dominican Republic or in the Caribbean, they might be needing an apostille. And in those cases, it's usually like their birth certificate needs to get apostille, a single status affidavit, if they've been married before, like a divorce decree. So sometimes there's 2 or 3 documents involved in that. With international students, whether they came from abroad to study here, or whether it's US students who are going to go study, let's say in Italy, but they need to show that they've already finished their bachelor's here in the States to study, you know, to go beyond and do their master's or PhD or whatever. They need to get their transcripts or diplomas or even their degree paperwork apostilled. So you've got that group of folks. And again, somebody who wants a double citizenship usually needs to get their birth certificate, go through the apostille process. And then you're not doing the rest of it. You're not doing the citizenship part of it. And some states don't even allow you to do immigration paperwork, but you're helping them fulfill that condition to be able to move on in what they have to do. So the long and the short, this is what the model apostille certificate looks like. In other words, when the Hague Convention established what needed to be filled out, or what needed to be presented with the document when the foreign country receives it, they're looking for a sheet of paper, and it's gonna, in a minute, you're gonna see every state decorates it in a different way, but it always has the same 10 features. It's gonna list the country, number 1, the country that the apostille is coming from, the apostille and the document. It's gonna list who signed it. If it's a state document, it's going to be a state official that shows up on the document. And all of this, Secretary of State is filling it out, not us. So that was a good question that came up in the previous class. Somebody said, oh, so we have to get that certificate and fill it out? No, Secretary of State is filling it out, but we're just going over it so that you have an idea what this famous apostille is all about. It's a certificate, and this is the basis of the certificate. It'll talk about what kind of seal or stamp it has, where was it certified, by whom, what's the number of the apostille, what's the official seal and stamp of the apostille, and then the signature generally of the Secretary of State. So with that in mind, every state, you know, is free to present the certificate the way that they want to. So look at these, all three of these are apostilles, but this is for the state of Florida. They decided on a blue watermark paper. It's got a seal, but no gold foil. The state of Alabama went with this color scheme, but they kind of have like a seal on it. And the state of California has a bigger seal and went with blue. So those are the different certificates. And then when you do your first one for your state, you'll find out what your state's looks like. So up to now, any questions?
Yes, we do have one from Cindy Caraballo. She states, what most international companies call an affidavit? Cindy, if you want to unmute and clarify your question.
Yeah, it wasn't a question. It just pretty much looked like what most countries call an affidavit. That's what it is.
Oh, okay. So thank you, Cindy. So were you wondering whether an apostille is what other countries may call an affidavit?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. So interestingly enough, a client might come to us with an affidavit, which is, and of course that affidavit mostly drawn up here in the States. That affidavit pretty much is like a sworn statement. You know, I swear that everything that's here is true and correct. And sometimes it's the requesting party, whoever's requesting that affidavit, just needs to know that this person is not lying, basically. So
Thank you.
yeah, but the affidavit, if it's going outside of the country, it's still going to need an apostille. So this would be a separate function. Okay. But thank you for that question. So basically, like, the apostille has to do with whatever transaction the person's having with the other party. But the apostille, the function of the apostille is to make sure that that document can be presented in the other country. More like a legal situation where it's valid in the other country. And more so, the apostille is going to be the origin, and the affidavit is going to have to do with the content. But moving on from there, with this close-up, you guys can see that it's got the same 10 features, right? This document is gonna be, the document, let's put it this way, the document that you notarized, that the person brought to you and maybe you participated in notarized, is under this. And they will usually staple it. Staple this top sheet, the apostille, to the rest of the document. And so it's basically saying that this apostille is coming from the United States. It was signed by Laurel Lee. What was her capacity? Secretary of State. The document that, let's say, is behind this apostille had the Great Seal of the state of Florida. And then now here it was apostilled in the state capital, Tallahassee, the 10th day of April, 2019. Who signed this particular certificate? It's the Secretary of State, and there's the state seal, and there's the signature. So the cute thing about this is, again, when you do your first apostille, and I'll be helping you guys out because I want you guys to get in there and mark it for it. And once you put it on your website, you're going to get a call. And when you get that call, with what you're going to learn today and tomorrow, you should be able to at least know where to start. What I do is, in the end, I'll give you my website. And then if you guys want to book like a 15-minute consult, when you get your first one and kind of say, okay, this is what I think I should do, but I'm not sure, then we can kind of walk through that. So this is, like we mentioned, the state of Alabama, and basically the same things, except that here the person that the apostille is certifying is the notary. So we have that privilege that there are going to be documents that come to us, like a power of attorney, or like Cindy mentioned, an affidavit. There's documents that fall in the state category, federal category, and then there's documents that fall in non-official. But that means that the customer is bringing it to us, and either it has a notarial wording at the bottom for us to fill out, or we need to attach a loose certificate if our state allows it. But then when we notarize, it's our signature as state officials that the Secretary of State is going to be certifying. And then once that's done, they'll send it back, and then we can give it to the customer and collect, which we'll talk about tomorrow, how we're going to charge and how we can set it up. But this is another one. This is the Secretary of State of California. And in this case, the person that signed was not a notary, but it was the deputy clerk recorder. And they have an extra stamp that they put on there. But after looking at these different examples, any questions?
Nope, not so far.
Okay, so then let's go into the next section here. What kind of documents? So now that we've discussed what an apostille is, what are the kind of documents that will be presented to us? The apostille convention said that they should be public documents. What does that mean? What are some state issued documents? What if somebody brings us a photocopy? Can we work with that and send it to the Secretary of State? And then for abbreviation purposes, you may hear me say SOS, and that's the Secretary of State. Most of the times we are looking as to where the document was issued, because that is the Secretary of State's office that we're going to be sending it to. And I think in a minute, that'll make a little bit more sense. So some of the questions that we'll be asking: does it matter where the document was issued? Does it matter what country it's going to? And very important, does the issue date of the document matter? Like if the birth certificate was issued 10 years ago, is it okay to use that one? Or should the client maybe order a newer one? So we'll take a look at those questions. Okay, so in terms of documents, these are the kind of documents that might come to you, might be presented to you: a birth certificate, a death certificate, a marriage certificate, or a divorce decree. And that category we're generally going to refer to as vital records. Students may come to you with a transcript or a diploma. Someone may have had something filed in the court, such as their divorce decree or any other paperwork. And so the document that you see might be a document that's signed by the county clerk. So aside from these state documents that we've discussed, every once in a while you might get an FBI background check. And it's so easy for us to just say FBI, and we don't remember that it means the Federal Bureau of Investigation. So that is going to be a federal document rather than a state document. What if it's not the FBI, but it's like a US patent agency? Then you may not see, what you will see rather is look for the document, and if it has any kind of seal, check and see if it's a state seal or if it's a federal government seal. And of course, you know, it'll say it, the great state of Virginia, or it might say, you know, the federal government. It'll have federal on it. And that's how you'll see. But one thing that somebody mentioned to me that is true, mostly you'll be dealing with state government, with state. Most of the documents that will be brought to you will be state related or non-official documents. Federal will probably be federal background checks, or if somebody has a lot to do with business, like if you're doing commercial accounts, if you market your service to a international business that's in your city or in your state and you want to kind of send emails and market that way, that's where you would be dealing more with federal and different state business documents. But for right now, we'll focus more on state and non-official documents. And sometimes clients will ask, if they bring us a photocopy of a birth certificate and you let them know, hey, I can't work with the photocopy, Secretary of State won't accept it, but you can order, once you order a certified copy, bring it on in. And they're like, well, where? So anything that's vital records, they're going to have to check with the state's vital records office. They can Google it. Anything that has to do with it, you see on the paperwork that it says court, then, they'd have to check with the county clerk of court. And this is, of course, if they're bringing a photocopy. But if the document, looks like a document that's official and ready to go, then you can continue forward. And then the SOS will let you guys know if for some reason they need it. They need for the person to order a newer copy. If it's a driving record, they can check with the state DMV office. And when it's transcripts and diplomas, they've always got to check with their college or university's registrar's office. Because when it comes to academic paperwork, sometimes the campus university registrar or college registrar, they will already notarize it for them. And sometimes they will even notarize an apostille. But there's still a market there because not all universities help their students get their paperwork apostille. So it's our job, and that's where I would love to help you guys brainstorm to kind of find out, well, what universities, what colleges are in my area, and even high schools, big high schools that sponsor a lot of exchange students. Try to find out who does an apostille, and then you can, and they'll be glad, because since students are going to be asking all the time and they're going to be saying no, then we can be that yes person. So keep that in mind. And I'll pause for any questions.
All right, I don't see anything, but the floor is open, guys.
Okay, so since you guys don't have any questions, or if anybody has questions, put it in the chat. I've got one more poll that, because when we're doing this, we get nervous, we forget. So I'm throwing out a poll there to know a little bit more about you guys in terms of what part of the country are you guys in? Because those of you who are closer to bigger cities, you have special opportunities. But not to say those of us who are not close to major metropolitan areas, because of the pandemic, pretty much everything now is also by email and mail. So we have a wonderful opportunity to, get our emails out to different colleges or universities. And you may not know where to start. And that's what I love to do. I love to do, research and find out for you guys, people that you can market to, like registrars, people that work at the registrar, so that you can get, more business. So I'll stop, I'll end the polling. Thank you. 78% of you participated. And as you can see, let me share. So 44 of you are from the East Coast, 28% from the South, about 13% Midwest. Oh, we don't have anybody from the North, so to speak. Southwest, 6%, and West Coast, 13%. So again, glad to have you guys here. And let's move forward. Okay, I have like 2 more questions, but I'll scatter them in, because what I wanted to get to here is that these are the different categories of documents. Very important to remember, little tips again, and you guys can put it in the chat. Is an apostille certificate, oh, and Nancy asked a question, which we'll get to in a minute. Is an apostille certificate something that needs to be placed on a document that is going to be used right here in the US? So like going from California to Chicago, and a student says, oh, the university said I have to do something with this, but I'm not sure what. Would it need an apostille? for right here in the US? Thank you. Oh my goodness, you guys right there. You guys have it. No, 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 no. Exactly. And like Lauren says, something to keep in mind, it's only for use overseas. So thank you. And I've got 2 questions. Let me go back here to Nancy said, with that being said, do we attach a jurat or an acknowledgement? So Nancy, if you don't mind unmuting, I know this goes back to what we were talking about previously. In what situation were we at when you asked that question? Do you remember?
When we are submitting the apostille to the Secretary of State, are we attaching a jurat or an acknowledgement with that, being if it's a birth certificate or marriage certificate or something like that?
Perfect. That's an excellent question. And of course, like you know, it's going to be up to our student to choose, but they are lost half the time. I said student, our client to choose, but they are lost half the time. So basically, you have to ask them. Now, with this birth certificate that we're going to be sending up to the Secretary of State to get the apostille, are you just, well, let me clarify something. With a birth certificate, you're not going to need a notarization at all. You're not going to need to notarize. And that brings up a good point that I was going to mention further down, but I'll say it now. If a state document already has the state seal and a signature, with that state seal, there usually is a signature of somebody that's a state official. We don't have to notarize because it already, so to speak, it already has a stamp and a state official's signature. When a document does not have a state stamp and a state official signature, that's when it generally needs notarizing. So
Okay.
if they brought a power of attorney, which we know that is just, you know, writing on a regular piece of paper, there's no state seal, there's no official signature. That's the beauty of it. We're going to be that state official because we are, state commissioned officials in that way. So we're going to be the state official who will be, according to our state's notary law, will go ahead and notarize. Now, when it's a power of attorney, are they just saying that they're the person who are signing it, or do they want to swear? And then that's where we would explain to them, you get to choose. Are you just doing it that you want me to identify you, or are you swearing that the content is true? Okay, so thank you for asking that. And then another question was, Miss Irina.
She wants to know, someone brings original documents, we notarize them, send them to Secretary of State, receive them back and return to the clients, return to the clients. And then her next question was, are we done basically at that point?
Yes, yes, ma'am. That's what I was saying. That is the basic process. So that is the basic process, and we'll have a summary of that in a minute.
But now I just want to add to that. Sometimes the documents may not need notarization, or they may have been notarized by another notary. Is that correct? Could that be correct?
That is
Okay.
correct as well. That is correct, because basically, like we mentioned, vital records will not need notarization. They already have a state seal and an official that signed it. Other state issued documents, and it's going to vary because it depends on what the person's doing. But let's say they're involved in establishing a business overseas, and it's going to be, a franchise of the one that they have here. So they may have documents from our Secretary of State. So we're talking about our own state, right? They might have documents from our own state Secretary of State. We're going to send it to our Secretary of State for apostilling, and it doesn't even need to be notarized because it already has the state seal and signature. But what if they bring us a birth certificate or a state issued document that is from Indiana, but I'm in Tennessee? Well, in that case, since it doesn't need notarizing, that is the beauty of it. because they're here and they don't want to go all the way to Indiana to do the process, but they don't know that they can do it by mail. So we go ahead and take it. We do it by mail, but we're not going to send it to our state Secretary of State. We're going to send it to whoever that seal is on that paperwork. And that's like a basic thing to keep in mind. If you keep in mind like 4 basic rules, you're always going to get it right. If it's a state issued document, it's going to go back to the Secretary of State for that state, the seal that you see on that state. So somewhere on that document, if it's state issued, it kind of mentions the state and it should have a seal. If it's not a state issued document, then it's the non-official documents that we were talking about. Some folks will refer to them as private documents. And those are documents like the client that's coming to us wrote a written statement. It doesn't have notarial wording, but we know that we can attach a loose certificate with the notarial wording if our state allows it. Some states allow you to stamp on the person's written letter or written statement, notarial wording. Some states allow that and some don't. That's where you have to do your due diligence and check with your state's notary handbook. And the notary primer, I don't have it here to show today, but very helpful because you can check the index and check and see if this is permissible. If you're not sure, you can always ask your Secretary of State. You can call them and ask. So with that being said, we'll continue on things to remember. Federal documents and vital records are never notarized. And remind your client whenever you get them the apostille that not to remove the staple from the apostille since that would invalidate it. So as we mentioned, going back here a few pages, the apostille is the actual certificate. It's going to be stapled to the document that they gave us. So sometimes there's a third process involved, which is they have the document, they had to get it translated. And sometimes in my state, once it's translated and notarized, it has to go to the county clerks. So there's a few documents and they all get stapled together with the apostille certificate on top. So sometimes folks are like, oh, after all, it doesn't have to be translated. I'm going to take that out. No. Leave it just as is, because if you take off the staple, you've invalidated it. So just something important to know and to share with the customer before they leave.
Okay. So Annie, to kind of continue on with Arena's question, you pretty much answered it with the birth certificate, marriage certificate, divorce decree, stuff like that. It does not need to be notarized because it's already going through a state process. She then went on to ask, so we just take the documents and become the courier at that point. So basically, I'm just wanting to highlight that because people need to understand that they can be and add a courier service for this process as well.
Exactly. Thank you, Tammy. And we'll talk a little bit about that tomorrow in terms of how you can break down. This topic is so interesting that we always go overboard. So it's almost time to start your Q&A. So what I'm going to wrap up with here is what we've talked about, just a few processes. And what helps me, like if you want to take a picture of it, I don't mind you taking a picture of it, but definitely, for you, don't share. And this way we can continue to share good information and I can continue to be available for you guys. And this is the part where I ask for audience participation. So raise your hand if you guys want to participate. Tammy will go ahead and call out on you and just unmute and you'll help us with one of the little steps with one square. So steps to prepare an SOS apostille. The general overview is step 1, and I'll pass it to you, Tammy.
Okay. Gather all pertinent info, documents that will need to be apostilled and the deposit. And then Adriel has his hand up.
Yes, Adriel, if you can help us with step 2.
So step 2 is inspect documents. Depending on the document, determine what additional steps are needed. Is a document issued in your state? What did your requesting party specify? Call the Secretary of State.
Exactly. And step 3, anybody?
I can read step 3 again.
Okay, you go, Adriel, and then we'll try, and then we'll have step 4 for Mrs. Stevenson.
Step 3 is notarize if necessary. Most documents will require notarization. Is it already notarized? Is it a vital record? Has a client included a written statement that will need to be signed and notarized in front of you?
Okay, so thank you. And Mrs. Stevenson, can you help us with step 4?
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right, step 4. Fill out SOS Secretary of State form. Fill out your SOS request form. Follow instructions. Call SOS office if you have questions.
Okay, thank you so much. And anybody up for step 5?
Lauren,
Mail out all necessary documents, gather form, client documents, money order, check and prepaid, return envelope, send off or drop off.
Thank you. And we'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Cool. And then the last one?
iPhone 44, if you like, you can go ahead.
Is that me? Is that
Yep.
Nikki? Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't know, guys. I've been muted the whole time, and I'm muted. I said, "Can you hear me?" Hey, guys. I'm sorry.
Yes.
I'm gonna go. So I'm the last one. Receive and deliver apostille documents. Mark your calendars on when to expect apostille documents. Deliver to client and collect final payment.
Cha-ching. That's where,
Ding,
that's where we go ahead and complete, because tomorrow I'll discuss that you want to kind of get 50% upfront whenever you take the document, and then the other 50% when you deliver. So thank you so much. So iPhone 44 is Nikki.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Nikki. And
Thank you.
somewhere there, Nancy.
And I'm in Maryland. I'm sorry.
You're
I'm
in
Maryland.
Maryland?
Just to let y'all know. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Maryland is a good state because you're like
Yes,
close
ma'am.
to
I
Washington,
know.
D.C.
Yes, ma'am. I know.
So
I got everything around me. I got John Hopkins. I got Morgan. I got everything near me. I'm right here in the city. I'm in Baltimore City. I'm located right in the city. So I got everything near me. A lot of potential here. A lot of potential, definitely.
Yes. Definitely. And then at the end here, I'm going to show you guys my which you see it right next to here, AnnieNotary.com. Call me, set up. I'll give you 10 minutes free. But if you ever want to do a few more minutes, it's $1 per minute. And let's brainstorm what areas you can, break into and send emails.
Good. Okay.
Yes. And I also wanted to say, Nancy, you had asked a question. If you don't mind telling us a little background. You said, if I'm in California and you're in Texas, can you ask that one again?
Oh, she answered it all right already. I was asking if it was if I'm in California and the document is it needs to go to Texas, I would send it to the Texas Secretary of State.
Okay, perfect.
Right. Yeah, she answered it for me already.
Okay, perfect. And Lori asked that she knows of quite a few notaries who ask for everything up front. That's going to be a business decision. If that is important for you and for your area, then you call the shots on that. A lot of folks, I'll add something to that. Make sure though that ahead of time you have them sign whatever your disclosures are, because for example, if they pay everything and the document, which it usually doesn't if you send it FedEx or priority, somewhere where it can be tracked, so that if it gets lost, they're going to be like, oh, so I paid you $300, my document's lost, and I don't get anything, so kind of set expectations and set the ballpark so that set up your arrangement so that if they're giving you everything, then you're giving something in exchange, which is speedy service and their document delivered, to their hot little hands. But that's another thing that we wanted to discuss. Of course, as you go into business, you'll find out, but try to set expectations with your customers, just in case that document takes a little longer or gets lost, that they know that it's a process where, because of the pandemic, it's a little uncertain now, and sometimes in terms of time frame for a regular apostille. Our state apostille here in Tennessee, I called them, I asked them, they said, check on the website, we let you know if we're backed up a few days or not. I ordered one and it took about a week and a half to get back to me. So if I'm going to speak to the customer, I'm not going to say a week and a half. I might tell them 2 weeks or 21 days, just, to buy some time and cushion just in case. So I did see something. Tammy, if you could help me out, I think Dina Perez had mentioned something that was interesting, but I missed that.
She mentioned about being a funeral director and having to send remains back overseas and having to do apostille process. And so she wanted to know, do you have to get the apostille overnighted back? Dina, if you wouldn't mind unmuting and clarifying your question.
Because of the time sensitivity on shipping human remains, I had to get the apostille, get all the documentation and submit it to get the apostille back. But I would do is I would send I would have to collect the fees up for FedEx for sending it, and also for sending it back to us.
Right.
Just because of the time sensitivity. Do you usually have it when documents are sent back to you? Do you usually have them FedEx it back, or do you just have them send it back just regular?
And that's an excellent question. So thank you for sharing that with us, Dina. So guys, tomorrow we'll talk about this more, but whenever we send our envelope, so to speak, our envelope to the Secretary of State, we want to make sure to include a self-addressed return envelope in there. And that can be a FedEx. It can be a FedEx next day if we open an account with FedEx and then we just put our account number. It can be a FedEx next day envelope. Or if you're doing US Postal Priority Service, I already checked with them and they said, yeah, since it's a flat rate, so basically when you go to the post office, you're buying a money order. I don't use my personal checks. I use a money order since it's somebody else also involved. And I buy either a FedEx. Well, when I'm doing FedEx, I do FedEx. But if I'm at the US Postal Service and I buy the US flat rate priority, I buy 2. And so he goes ahead and he or she puts the stamp on it, and I can fold it and address it to myself and put it in there. And I always like to get the apostille back so that I can deliver to my client. And again, either they're going to come to me or I'm going to go to them. But if I go to them, that's that courier fee. So thanks for the question, Dina. And yes, normally I do next day when it's quick and time sensitive.
Okay. We do have a question. Tiffany, you have your hand raised.
And
Tiffany.
Yes, Tiffany, we're here.
Okay, we'll come back to you, Tiffany. Yes. Nancy, oh, I'm sorry. Tiffany, are you ready?
Yeah, never mind.
Okay.
Never mind. Thank
Okay.
you, though.
All right.
So guys, I'm just going to go over these last 6 slides and then open it up for all and any other questions. And so a simple state apostille, to kind of recap, you're getting, let's say, vital records. Those are state. A state issued document, a document issued by state courts, or even, and I didn't include it here, but even an unofficial document, a private document, which is a document that the client either got from a template from the internet, they got a template from Office Depot for their affidavit, power of attorney, copy certification, which can only be done in some states. The thing is that they need us to notarize something according to our notary law. If we can, it's either going to already have notarial, and I'm talking about unofficial documents. They're either going to already have notarial wording, or we're attaching a loose leaf certificate. We notarize the unofficial ones, the state issued. We don't have to notarize if it has the seal and the signature. And then what's the next step? This is the most simple process. The next step is you send it to the SOS, like we mentioned, with the appropriate form, fee, and the return envelope. This is just reviewing. Any of these documents are state issued or notarial or even federal. Federal, again, you mostly will get federal background checks. And there, you're not going to send it to your Secretary of State. And my next slide, we'll talk about that. But this was just a little reminder that sometimes a customer will bring a photocopy of a birth certificate or a vital record, and we usually will not work with a photocopy. They'll need to order a certified copy from the Department of Vital Records, from the county clerk, or the clerk of district court. But what I did want to check is, what if it's a federal background check that they bring to you? So then it's going to follow this, it's going to be parallel to what you were doing, but you're not going to send it to your SOS because that's a state agency. So what you're going to do is you're going to send it to a federal agency that apostilles, and that's the US Department of State. So if it's a federal background check, sometimes there is a certified passport documents, and there's other federal documents. Those you would send with the appropriate form, fee, and return envelope, but here to the Office of Authentications for the US Department of State. This is the physical address, but they prefer that you send it to the mailing address. And that's their phone number to ask questions. You can also go to the website, travel.state.gov, and then search under authentications. And you are going to find their fee, which is, like they say, we haven't even discussed, hopefully we can start with that next time. What are the fees to get an apostille? Because in my state, for example, it's just $2. That's the cost involved at the state level. Does anybody else know what they pay in their state if they wanted to request an apostille from the SOS?
Yeah, I think Georgia is $2 or $3 as well.
I know that California is on the higher end, they're 20. Some states are 15. Okay, it's coming in. Michigan, or actually Massachusetts, $6. Hi, Linnell. Linnell's reached out to us from
New York.
$10 in New York. 20. Where are you, Nancy? Because I know it's 20 in California. So wondering if, yeah, 20 in California. And so it kind of ranges from oh my goodness, 25, is that New Jersey? Wow, so New Jersey wins in the highest amount, but still $25 is not a whole lot. But that kind of tells us a little bit about cost, because if we're going to send it next day and we're including an envelope for them to return it next day, that's about 27 plus 25. So it starts adding up. And that's why for the apostille to charge $200 is kind of like on the simple end. If it's going to be rushed or expedited, that adds to it. Mississippi, $5. Okay, Texas, 15. Ooh, California has to add 20 plus another 6. So that's on the higher end, but it's still, you charge appropriately given that. And this was the other situation that I was saying. Sometimes the document is presented to you in another language. They can either translate it, or if you find a translator that you can have a partnership with, then the translator would translate, you would notarize, because it's going to need a certified translation statement. And the translator will know about that statement, but he will need somebody to notarize that. So you can arrange that. Either he or she will pay you, or you guys work out a fee that if he translates at a certain rate, a little bit lower, then, you know, it includes the notarization. And then of course you can upsell to your client because you're helping them get that out of the way. If not, you have to send them to get it translated and bring it back to you with that certified translation statement so that you can send it to the SOS. And then this part again is the same step. You're packaging it up to go. And if you need a translator in the state of Tennessee, going from English to Spanish, then you guys can reach out to me. I can help you out with that. If you're in another state and want to find out who might be a good translator, I've got some connections, so reach out to me and maybe we can discuss. And then the last case is where it starts adding a few steps. Sometimes you have the document, but the document was signed, for example, a transcript. Well, a transcript's not a good example because they usually will get that notarized by the registrar's office. But sometimes they have a document and they want to get it notarized, but somebody else signed it. So, oh, this is a letter. Let's say this is a letter from my employer, a reference letter, and I just want to get it apostille to send to a new job that I'm seeking abroad. Well, the employer who signed it is not the one that's coming in front of you, so you cannot really apostille that, notarize that. But if the client writes a written letter, we can't tell them what to do, but we can share that what many people have done, they'll write a written letter saying, this letter is from my employer when I worked at such and such a place during such and such dates. So kind of like a letter that explains why they're needing to use that letter. We can notarize that by attaching a loose certificate. That extra step of the county clerk only applies in 6 states. So, check out with your Secretary of State with the website if your state requires you to do one extra step to go to your county clerks before you go and send everything to SOS. And you'll find this out, I'll show you here in a minute, by going to your Secretary of State's webpage and checking under authentications or apostilles. And then when you gather all of this, you would package it up. So that is it for today. Tomorrow we'll pick it up over here with some of these pointers about inspecting the document, knowing your notary law, and then different types of documents that you'll be seeing.
All right, so we do have a couple of quick questions here.
Yes.
I'm showing Miss Nancy, you have your hand raised.
Hi, yes, I want to ask, as a notary, we write things in our journal, but when we are doing the apostille and it does not have to have a certificate attached to it, are we still putting that in our journal as a record, or how are we keeping a record and a track of that?
Yes, and who's asking that question?
Nancy from California.
Okay, Ms. Nancy, thank you so much for asking that. See, I hadn't even thought about the portion of when it's a birth certificate, of course, we don't have to notarize it. So on that part, it didn't even go into our notary side of our business. In other words, we didn't even put our notary hat on that. So it's not going to go in our journal because it wasn't anything that had to do with notarizing. That would also apply if the client brings us a document that's already notarized, and the next step is to pretty much get the SOS form and package it. We're not even going to notate it in our notary journal. That was not notary related. That's why we don't have to, a person doesn't have to be a notary to be an apostille coordinator. You see? Now, on the other hand, when the document that they bring is a document that has to be notarized because it has notarial wording, or because they say, no, I'm swearing that the content of that document is true. And you're like, okay, so in that case, I have these 2 forms, and they select the jurat. The minute that we're involved in the notarization process, that is where we would use our journal. You think that kind of wraps that question?
Yes.
Touches on that question? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, like Fatima said, that was a really good question because again, it's only when we're notarizing. And to that point, if we ever get a document that's already notarized, but let's say what the customer brings to you is a copy of a birth certificate, a photocopy, because we already established it has to be a certified copy. It has to be what many of us have probably already ordered for our family, which is a long, sometimes there's a long version of the birth certificate, sometimes there's a short version, but it's always on watermark paper. It's always with the seal, the state seal. It always says the name of the state. And that's what we usually call that, oh, an original birth certificate, but it's actually a certified copy. That's what we can work with. So if they bring us a photocopy that somebody did stamp and, oh, this is already notarized, so you can take it from here, we can let them know. If you want to pay me to do that, I happen to know that the Secretary of State will probably reject it because it's a photocopy. And they are saying that, why would you need a photocopy when you can order a certified copy? And they can say maybe because it's time sensitive, but it's like, well, if you want me to do it and pay me, but understand that if they reject it, you're going to have to do it again and you'll have to pay me another fee. So it's up to you. But generally the Secretary of State doesn't accept photocopies because it's a sensitive document. It's a birth certificate and they want to make sure it's a certified copy. So from here on out, it's open to you guys. Tammy, I'm going to give them, we've been doing questions for the past 15 minutes, so I'll give them another 15 to 20 minutes.
Okay.
If you need to be somewhere, I understand, but I can go ahead because
No.
I did go over a little.
I'm good. I'm good. We do
Okay.
have Ms. Linda has her hand raised for a question.
And take it away, Ms. Linda.
I'm sorry, I didn't, you know what? I probably was by accident.
Oh, okay. All right.
But you know what? Let me ask you this. Okay, so I mean, you had said something about if a document from another state, we don't do state to state, it's country for country, correct? Is that accurate or how's that work?
I think you have a good question, but tell me again, please.
Okay, somebody had mentioned something about if a document was from Texas and it go to the Texas SOS. My question is, the documents are to be is it from country to country, or is it from state to state to do this process?
Excellent question, because I could see where there could be confusion there, because it usually is going from the US to an overseas country.
Right, okay.
However, when we're seeking the apostille for the customer, we're going to be sending it to our state's secretary. Let me clarify, let me backtrack. We're going to send it to the Secretary of State that is that state seal. If it's a state issued document. And again, we talked about that we're either going to be getting a state issued document. It has the state seal. It mentions that it's state, the name of the state. It mentions the official and an official signed it, a state official. We're either getting a federal document. It has a federal seal and it's probably like an FBI check. It has the word federal somewhere, maybe in the title of the document. And then we have regular documents that the customer is having a power of attorney, an affidavit that they need notarized, or any document that needs notarization. Since we all are involved in getting training, even the trainer also needs training. And one of our mentors is always saying that anything can be notarized. Somebody wrote something on a piece of paper and they want to notarize this little piece of paper. Well, that's why we have the loose leaf certificates, and we, they can, if they want to staple it, they can staple it, we attach it, but it can be, anything can be notarized, because basically they're saying, I brought this document and it was me who signed it in front of you, or I signed it and I brought it to you, that's the acknowledgement, or I'm swearing to the content of the document. So basically it can be any document. The only problem exists when there's a document that's signed by somebody else. We can't notarize somebody that's not before us. But if they want to do a letter that says, this is a copy of an original, or this is a letter that I will be needing to use for this and this purpose. The previous letter was signed by so-and-so. It's a letter of reference and I need it for this purpose. And then they sign in front of us, or they signed it and brought that letter, we can notarize that. So going back to your question though, sorry, that was a little tangent, but going back to your question, if the person is bringing a state document, but it's not from my state of Tennessee, it's from Ohio, then when I send it back to get, if it's a birth certificate, when I send it back to get apostilled, I can't send it to Tennessee. Tennessee is going to say, I don't have anything to do with that. That's not my state seal. So we just have to be mindful of that. Where are we sending it? To what Secretary of State are we sending it? Now, most of the time, people are going to come with us with documents, you know, from the very state that we're both in, but not always.
Okay, okay. No, thank you.
Does that kind of clarify a little?
No, it does. I think I
Yeah.
missed the first part, what you had mentioned
Yeah.
before. Okay, thank you.
And any more questions, Tammy, since that moment?
Yeah. So we have extraordinary notary services. She asked, back when you were talking about receiving the apostille documents back from the Secretary of State, she's stating basically you would have them send it back to you. And I'm thinking that you said that because it would provide you good quality control to make sure everything was done correctly.
Yes.
Before you send it over to your client, right?
That is correct. That is correct. There's a funny thing that happens too. As apostille coordinators or agents, we have to be we're transparent, but we're also particular. So if somebody has a headache, somebody has a problem, what they want is a solution. So we don't really have to go all into detail. Oh, I'm going to do this, and this portion costs this, and this portion costs that, because then they start getting picky. But if they have a problem and we say, look, I know what your problem is, I'm going to help you to solve it. Leave it in my hands. Leave the worrying to me. I'll call you when I have your document ready. The benefit of that is if it's time sensitive and you want to have it sent directly to them, but you know the things that can happen. What if they don't get it? They call you a week later. You don't even know what the tracking number is anymore. So if you're going to do it that way, make sure that you track and make sure they get it. But something that goes in that envelope is the receipt from the Secretary of State. So if you want them to know that you paid $2, plus of course everything else that you did, but they're going to see $2 and they're going to expect that, oh, you paid $2, so you should have charged me $5. So, to eliminate that extra situation, have it, sent to you. And then if you want to have them come pick it up, fine. If you want to deliver it, fine. And if you want SOS to send it to them, that's up to you.
All right. And she also asked, at what point would you request payment in full? But I guess that's a business decision, is it not? Some people will ask for half up front and half when it's done, and some people want the whole thing up front. So
right. And the reason why, and guys, sorry, while you guys were talking, I was gonna wait to send this and it went out. If you guys click on that link, it should take you to a survey. And so oh, hello, I clicked on it myself. Yeah, it should. Last time it didn't work, that's why I'm surprised. It should take you to this page. This is my page. If you scroll down to the bottom, you will find a survey. And if you don't mind filling it out real quick, it'll give me a sense for what you guys liked and what we can improve on. And tomorrow we'll talk about the different areas, but I kind of touched on them a little. So fill that out real quick if you don't mind. Send it back, and then that'll also take you to my page where I have some forms that help you with keeping all of these different things in mind. And it's the middle one here with the checklist icon. But going back to y'all's questions, anything else out there?
Yeah, Miss Linda, you have your hand raised.
Let me ask you this. So to become a apostille, is there a formal training or you just say, hey, I'm one, or what? What do you?
Yeah, no, that is fabulous. So basically, guys, I started 10 years ago, and like Monica, I love how Monica says it. And she said that other people just had the information closely held. They would not budge. So it took me like 2 years to, you know, trip and fall and find things out. So now it's still something that has become so popular, and more people are traveling. More of us live close to areas where it doesn't even have to be metropolitan. Like somebody said, and I think it was Dina, she said, oh my goodness, I have so many universities and colleges and high schools nearby. I'm going to reach out to them. Yeah, because we have international communities, even if we might be, you know, rural or small town. So we can take advantage of this, but it's still early in the game. There isn't a federal certification process. So when you take our class, we're equipping you with everything that you need to do it, but we also have the mentoring and the one-on-one. It's $1 a minute, for example, here, one-on-one, 15 minutes, a power chat. You kind of tell me what you want to do, and I kind of send you off. And if you want to call again, fine. But the idea is that you feel comfortable with it, and you'll receive, after you pass the assessment, which should be loading up anytime later this week or early next week. You have to pass it 80% of the questions, which is the assessment test for Notary Nerds University. And you'll get a completion certificate. And then you can feel comfortable calling yourself an apostille coordinator, an apostille agent. You can put it on your website. And so the main thing that you're going to want to be ready before somebody calls you is just the process. Kind of walk it through. Some of the things that I do with some of the mentees that call in is like a mock apostille. What if I get this document? What if I get that one? And then when you get your first one, if you need to reach out, well, we're here as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Yeah, so
let's see here. I don't see any other hands and no more questions in the chat. So the floor is open. Anyone, if you have any other questions.
yes, we've got 5 more minutes. If you guys have any other questions, if not, if you guys are like me, sometimes I have to go back on my notes and sleep on it, but tomorrow we'll pick it back up. And so if you have questions that pop up in the middle of the night, write them down.
Adriel, your hand is raised.
Yeah, so my question is, so with the like 15-minute thing, you know, the $1 a minute thing with you, would that help like you showing me how to market to whatever I want to market to type of deal, or is that something you would help with?
Yeah, that would be something that definitely, because what I try to do is just, because it's all there ready for you, but sometimes you're at a step where you need to kind of coordinate, who would I market to? So tomorrow's class will touch a little bit on it, but if you want like to get more specific for your area, then, you know, definitely call me in. We'll discuss and find out, you know, if you can do a little bit of your research. Do you have several universities close to you, colleges, high schools, that maybe like big high schools? Like my high school, when I graduated, I think it was 600, but I've heard of high schools where it's like a class of, you know, 1,500. And sometimes they have students, international students who have come, and they're going to go back, and we can just touch base maybe with somebody at the high school that helps them when they get their diplomas. Will they need to apostille it so that when they get to their country and they're going to continue maybe to college in their country for an international exchange student, I'm talking, will they need to show that diploma since they finished their schooling here in the States? So it would be any question that you have about apostilles, or if you want to kind of brainstorm what areas or what people you're going to try to send emails to advise them of your service.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And I will say, to piggyback off of that, me and Monty was talking yesterday. So the fingerprinting class that a lot of people took through Notary Nerds last weekend touched on this as well. If you're interested in the fingerprint aspect, a lot of times you might want to go ahead and offer apostille as well, because when you get to some of those, I guess, for lack of a better term, higher end clients that's going to pay for that service for you to come to their office and things of that nature to fingerprint them. A lot of times they may be being sent out overseas to work for whatever reason, and they might need some documents apostilled. So it's something to think about on that front as well.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Tammy, because this is, for example, tomorrow we'll go a little bit more into this. But for example, your areas of business, and you can focus on all, or like some people do, you start with one focus area, work it, and then you'll find out if you like that or if you want to move on to another focus area. But you can try to market to, like we said, travel, Facebook groups. There's expat Facebook groups, and we'll go into what is an expat tomorrow. What about adoptions and adoption agencies? Many times they have a lot of paperwork that needs to be notarized and apostilled since they're going to adopt a child overseas. There's the fingerprinting that just came up. There's military families if you live close to a base. There is destination weddings, and there is the always necessary birth certificate that needs to be apostilled. So it was a pleasure to have you all tonight, and throw your email in the chat, and that way, as things come up, I can be in touch with you guys. Sometimes, for example, like I was saying, I worked on a digital workbook for part 1 that you can keep all your notes in one place, and now I'm working on part 2. So when the part 1 and part 2 are, part 2 is fully ready, I would reach out to you guys. And Tammy, thank you so much for moderating for us.
My pleasure, as always. I love a good mastermind.
Yeah, I love having you as well.
Thank you, ladies.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Let me see if I can pull this up where I can see everybody. About how many do we have still with us? Because I know some may have had to.
31 that's still here right now.
Oh, wow. That's wonderful. That
Mm-hmm.
is wonderful. And so,
Class
yeah,
is
so
very
tomorrow,
informative.
you remember, mark your calendars, and we'll meet right back up here tomorrow, 5 p.m. Central Standard.
Sounds good. Everyone have a good night.
Yes. And everybody rest up. Have a good day. And we'll catch you
See
tomorrow.
everyone tomorrow.
Yes.
Right, thank you.
Bye, Michelle, Narisa, Cindy, iPhone 44, Lori,
Night.
Angela, Linnell. I want to say Janine, because I see Janne, but you have to correct me. Meredith. I hope you got your stuff, Meredith. Let me know if you have any questions. Dana, Terry, Tracy, Patricia, Nita, Irina, Jennifer, James, Deidre. Catch you guys tomorrow.
Well, Annie, was another good class.
Priscilla, oh, thank you for the support. And let me see here. There's the other part here that I have to. You cannot minimize. I'm not trying to minimize. I'm trying to stop recording.